what you can do then in the course of peak week is when you want to drop water overnight is jack up the foot of the bed and sleep that way.
What's up, guys? It is time to get sciencey with Scott Stevenson in this episode of Muscle Minds. Scott shares with us a technique on getting absolutely dry for your contest without using diuretics. Plus, we have some listener questions. Guys, if you enjoy the content, then do me a favor, hit the like button, leave us a comment, and if you haven't subscribed, then I encourage you to, because we have several bodybuilding podcasts coming out each week. We'd love to have you along for all of them. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Muscle Minds with Scott Stevenson. I'm Scott McNally. Of course, all of our programming is always brought to you by TrueNutrition.com. Awesome supplements. I can't speak highly enough about them. Reach out to me if you want to talk about flavors of their protein powders. You can use our code THINK, and that helps to support our programming. For our Canadian people, we're also brought to you by SupplementSource.ca. I checked it out. If you buy 2 packs of ephedrine there, Scott, you can get them for $2.95 a pack. So just throwing it out there. If you're in Canada,
can it get to the U.S.?
No, it's a Canadian.
Okay, so.
Yeah, it's a Canadian thing. Okay. So just take advantage of the fact that you guys have ephedrine, and you should take at least 3 doses a day. We've got a bunch of stuff going on here. Scott's got some stuff about.
That's not medical advice. It's just general, like take your vitamins, take your ephedrine. That's
exactly. Scott's got a bunch of stuff for us. We're gonna talk about a lot of stuff related to peak week. And I had a question we were going to launch off with. I know we got another question in the live feed. Anybody who wants to toss questions up, you guys are welcome to. So this came to us from one of our Patreon people. He actually lives about an hour from me, Scott. He listens to all of our shows. Adam is his name. Shout out to Adam. He signed up for the Patreon, and he's come over to the house for some extensive personal training lessons. So he's he had a gastric sleeve done. Okay?
That would be TPT in this case. Total personal training. TPT, not TRT, but TPT.
Yes, and
okay.
So he's training, he's lifting, and he is losing fat. I want to say he was 3 bills, and he's coming down a pretty decent bit. He's been dieting for a while now with this, but here was his question. He's not a guy who's ever contest prepped.
One thing before you read that, I went to Facebook. Did you restart a new video? Because it shows the live video has ended on Facebook.
That is your computer. If you refresh it, it would come back. We're live. Okay. I promise you.
All right. No, I figured.
We're good. I don't make mistakes. I don't know. Yeah.
I will quote you on that.
Okay. So
Adam's you have an abscess from your TRT. You say it was intentional.
I think this is a good question for Muscle Minds. Is there a maximum caloric deficit based on body fat levels? I've heard that a pound of body fat can only release so many calories per day. If so, what happens if someone goes below that? And do any compounds or exercises increase the rate of energy transferred per pound? Thanks. What does he mean by this, first of all, Scott?
That's going to be the first step in tackling this question, or sort of series of questions. There's a typical terminology you see in the context of fat loss and caloric deficit, that kind of stuff. But I think he's got a couple ideas sort of kind of meshed together in his mind that we can tease apart. So first and foremost, a caloric deficit. The way we use that, what that actually means, like you're not defying the laws of thermodynamics in any way. You're just consuming less calories than what you're expending. And the penultimate goal would be that all of those calories that your body needs to do what it does, lift, walk, simply basal metabolic rate, come from body fat. In fact, the holy grail can actually happen when someone's starting off, or if they're using McNally style TRT, perhaps they could even gain muscle and lose fat simultaneously. That can happen.
Yeah.
But the idea is that if you expend 3,000 calories and you take in 2,000 calories, then there's 1,000 calories that have come from your body's body fat reserves, and that's the energy. So that's why you get leaner. That's kind of the whole idea. So the heard that a pound of body fat can only release so many calories. So if you look at a pound, which is 454 grams, and that's what a pound. That's what. Then if you look at 9, let me do the math here. We'll get the exact numbers just in case someone wants to follow along.
All right.
And a pound of fat is I've got my computer set in German,
right?
so yeah. So the calculator is not a C; it's an R for Rechner. It is. Yeah, they changed. Everything's all flipped around. So 454, we multiply that times 9, which is just an average. That gives us 4,086, which you would think, well, we always hear this 3,500 calories in a pound of fat. That's because your average pound of fat is maybe 80 to 90% water. There's actually some variability. Fat cells do have some water in it. Fat as a tissue does have some water in it. So that's where that 3,500 calories in a pound of fat comes from.
Okay.
So if you just bought like gristle and fat at the butcher, or just took all the steak that you ate for a month or several months and just took all the fat, loaded it up, about a pound of fat would give you about 3,500 calories. So that's the caloric value of that pound. Okay. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, and maybe that would change the way he asked that second question. I've heard that a pound of fat can only release so many calories per day. So that's the idea. A pound of body fat has about that many calories, but it does vary. Actually, it's interesting, and that's one thing that may even vary over the course of a diet. When someone is holding a lot more water, when they're if they're coming off their off season, or if they're started off with a lot of more body fat and they diet down and they don't have as much body water, typically you don't think of body fat having a lot of water in it, but the hydration of the fat cells does vary. Yeah. I've seen values between like 70 and 90%. 70 would be very, very high, meaning 30% water, and 70 to 90% triglycerides or triacylglycerols in there. So
I could see that.
Yeah, so it varies some.
I could see that, but just simply like the logic of like looking at my own body or a client's body, that what do they look like when they're depleted versus full? And of course the muscle size can change, but you get that you're getting sub-Q water, but I'm telling you, man, like the fat looks fluffier. Do you know what I mean?
Without it, well, the thing is that adipose is actually a form of connective tissue. So adipose tissue is connective tissue. Yeah.
What?
Yes.
Okay.
It serves other purposes. So your tissue types are nervous, nervous tissue, muscle tissue, epithelial tissue, and which one am I missing?
You didn't say adipose yet.
And connective tissue.
Connective tissue.
Nervous, muscle, epithelial, and connective tissue. Connective tissue. So those are the 4 tissue types.
Yeah.
If you look this up in your A&P book, this is what you'll see. So connective tissue is a tissue type that you'll find in an organ. So like the skin is an organ called the integument, and it contains all of those tissue types. You've got nerves in your skin. You've got smooth muscle in the vessels. You've got epithelial tissue that makes up the endothelium, which is inside the vessels that are there. And you've got connective tissue. So connective tissue is part of tendons, it's part of ligaments, and adipose actually is a form of connective tissue.
I'll be damned.
And those fat cells in there, obviously, there's a storage function. There's a thermodynamic function, so it keeps you warm when it's cold. Yeah. It's actually, and there's actually brown adipose tissue in humans, more so in leaner people than actually in obese people on average, or overweight people. So it can actually be a form it's a form of energy, of course, but also as a way to warm you up. So shivering thermogenesis actually happens. Brown adipose tissue thermogenesis, people can throw that into Google Scholar and see that. So anyway, if you look at adipose, getting a little anatomy lesson here. People talk about tissue and they say muscle tissue. It's like, okay, well, the muscle is a type, but you've got cardiac, smooth, and skeletal. Those are the three forms of that tissue type. But a muscle is actually an organ that's composed of all those tissue types. There's nerves in there. There's skeletal muscle cells. There's connective tissue in the vessels. In the connective tissue layers, the endomysium that is the outer fascia of the muscle, and then of course you've got connective tissue that runs. Which one am I missing? Epithelial tissue, nervous tissue. Yeah, they're all there. So anyway, enough of that. So you've got so many calories in a pound of body fat. And so then next part of the question, fourth one, is if someone goes below that value. So let's say you eat nothing.
Yeah.
And you've got 3,500 calories in a pound of body fat. So, and your metabolic rate might be 2,000. Your caloric expenditure might be around the caloric equivalent of a pound of body fat. So that would be a day of fasting. And what happens is that you will use fat, but because you're so catabolic, your body is going to be having to pull so hard from those calorie stores. You're going to turn on all sorts of mechanisms of metabolism, which is going to involve cortisol, and that's going to mean breakdown of protein, so you can provide amino acids for gluconeogenesis to provide glucose because your brain likes glucose.
Okay.
You're also going to have ketones. You're going to be in ketosis pretty damn fast too. So if you go below that, then you're going to be very, very catabolic for sure. And you're going to lose muscle. So that's a huge caloric deficit of a pound of fats worth per day.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of teasing apart what his question is. And then, do any compounds or exercises increase the rate of energy transfer per pound? You're not going to change the law of thermodynamics. Like, you're not going to make, a pound. You wouldn't want to increase the rate. The way he says this is so strange. It's just because he's not quite sure what's going on. The rate of transfer per pound is going to be a function of your caloric deficit. So how fast you pull from a pound of fat, if you could just have that 1 pound to pull from, depends on what your caloric deficit is. So if you had a caloric deficit of 3,500 calories, then you would pull 3,500 calories and you'd empty that pound's worth of fat in 1 day.
Okay.
If that's what you did, if that's your daily caloric deficit.
That'd be great.
If you had 500, yeah, it'd be awesome. Well, that's what people try to do with DNP.
Yeah.
Basically, is you don't with DNP you still have the same caloric equivalent in a pound of body fat or the food that you eat or what have you. It's just that you do a horrible job of coupling the energy, the derivation of energy from that food, from the fat molecules, the carbohydrate molecules, everything, into ATP that the cells can use. You uncouple that process. The simplest way is like if you've got a dam that uses water flowing downstream to turn turbines that generate electricity. Imagine if you just allowed that water to flow around the turbines.
Yeah,
that's what DNP does.
Okay.
Yeah. So you in order to get the energy you want, you have to burn more calories, and that creates heat, and that's why people get so hot on DNP.
Okay.
That's why it can be so dangerous, because of the runaway process.
Yeah.
So that's what thermogenic compounds would do, that increase your energy rate of energy expenditure. The more you move, increases the rate of your energy expenditure. Compound exercises will do that. So that's the rate of energy expenditure. It's not the rate of transfer per pound of body fat. Well, it is, yes, but that's a very odd way of stating it if you kind of get what's going on there in terms of pulling from your body fat stores to provide the energy that you're not getting from your food. So I hope that answers his question.
I'm still not sure if I get it completely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Please let me know what you're.
I guess okay. So I understand the part you're telling me that fat can release energy up to a certain amount per day. Where is the I guess I just don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it.
Imagine,
I don't get it.
imagine you don't make mistakes. I made the mistake. It's not you.
You made a mistake.
I know this
by not explaining it in a way that I understood.
I know. Obviously. So imagine you got a bucket here, and and it's got a pound of fat in there.
Yeah.
And imagine you just heated it up. You put it on the oven in a pot, and you boil it up. So now it's fluid, right?
Yeah.
So you can the rate of energy that you pull from that would depend on how fast you pour it out. If you ate nothing and you expended 3,500 calories, so that's the energy in that fat in the bucket, and that was your caloric deficit for the day, you would basically that bucket would be empty at the end of the day.
Right, because you would have used it all. So
you would have burned off 1 calorie fat. Now that would be a ridiculous caloric deficit.
Yeah,
because
we're not taking
never happen.
Oh, go ahead. I guess we're just
never. Go ahead.
This is not real life, though. Like,
no,
this is not bodybuilding.
Adam, I'm being nice. Adam's asking like sort of theoretical questions without an understanding of the basics of thermodynamics and how the body is put together.
Okay.
So a maximum caloric deficit based on body fat levels, your caloric deficit is like if you could take someone in a day and say your life depends on it, I want you to run as hard and as fast as you can,
right,
and they expend 10,000 calories.
Yeah.
That would be their I mean, if I answer this question sort of directly, that would be their caloric expenditure for the day. If they ate nothing, they would have a 10,000 calorie caloric deficit on that day because that's all they could do.
Yeah.
Now, could they do that more? Could they expend 12,000 calories if they start off at a lower body fat level?
Huh.
Probably. If they were obese and they tried to do that, it might be 8,000 calories.
Yeah.
So, body fat will determine how many calories you can expend and what your theoretical caloric deficit would be.
Yeah. Okay.
In a day, if you ate nothing and just expended as many calories as possible. But it doesn't change the fact that a pound of fat has about 3,500 calories in it.
I see. Yes.
That's just what a pound of fat has. So you can't make that worth more or less. But what you can do is change, like for instance, DNP, and not proffering DNP, but it fits into this idea, is that DNP makes you really poor at deriving energy from that body fat. So in order for your body to get what you would normally get from a pound of fat, it might have to burn a pound and a half of fat.
I see.
Because you've uncoupled. The water doesn't flow through the turbines; it flows around the dam.
Yeah.
So your body has to, in order to get the energy, the electricity it needs, it has to have more water flowing to make up for the spillover and the wasted. So it's a wasting of energy from food, from your body fat stores, that DNP causes. So you have to burn more just to meet your energy needs for the day.
Okay, I gotcha.
No one would ever have a maximum caloric deficit because now a better question, the more relevant question is, what is the highest caloric deficit you can have and still preserve muscle mass? And that's what bodybuilding
I like that question.
About.
Yeah, that question applies. That's what we're trying to figure out on it. That in a real world experience, that's what I'm looking at every day.
Yes, and that's why, for instance, like one thing that I've seen mentioned a couple of times is natural competitors don't have PEDs to help them hold on to muscle mass, so they will very often have a very, very long prep.
Yes.
It could be psychological reasons. They just like prepping. They like saying they're in prep. They like the structure. There's probably a psychological difference between a natty and a PED using bodybuilder. On average, you probably see lots of overlap, but there's some things they do differently.
Yeah.
So you could diet down. Actually, on the short term, you can diet with a pretty high caloric deficit to hold on to muscle mass. But if you could maybe have an 800 calorie a day caloric deficit and lose fat really quickly, if you're loaded up on a super duper SMTRT type of protocol that lets you hold on to muscle mass.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you're natural, and especially if a natural guy diets down and testosterone goes into the tank, and cortisol goes up, you've got a recipe there for losing muscle mass if you try to push your caloric deficit. So you have to go very, very slowly to hold the muscle mass and lose the body fat.
Yeah.
And everyone is different in that regard. This is what the cool studies they've done with twins demonstrate that, if you throw a group of people, a whole slew of people into a group, and I've talked about this study I think a few times here, and they did one study where they overfed them by 1,000 calories a day, 6 days out of the 7 of the week. The other study, they added 500 calories of exercise and reduced their calories by 500 based on what was a caloric need at the beginning of the study, put them through that for 3 months. There's a huge range in terms of how much body weight and body fat was lost.
Yeah.
But when they looked at the twins, the identical twins had almost the exact same results. But you look at any pair of twins, there's one twin that just couldn't lose weight to save their life. They hardly lost anything, and another pair lost a lot. Some that has to do with the genetics to some degree, how their body holds on to body fat, sort of what set point it has for body fat, as well as what happens when to your NEAT, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, when you go into a deficit. Do you just become a slug and you want to lie around? Or you do feel like, this didn't bother me. I'm going to just keep doing things and keep my mind busy so I'm not worried about being hungry.
Yeah.
And you may even expend more energy when you're in a deficit. For some people, actually probably do that. I do that intentionally when I diet down.
We've talked about that. You've talked about like working around the house, working on your camper, your truck, keeping busy. I think that makes sense too. I really do.
Yeah. So you can only go so fast, and how well you can do that is a function of the person, function of the whether what kind of PEDs they have, how much muscle mass they gain.
I was going to ask you that. How much muscle do they have?
Yeah. So, and how long they've maybe even had it. I've always suspected that the explanation, we talked about this here too, I think, for why it makes sense to, if you just gain some new muscle mass during a productive off season, to try to hold that for a few months.
Yeah.
So you can enlist those mechanisms of muscle memory that are involved. So the satellite cells that have sort of settled in and taken up residence, epigenetic changes that might be involved there. So anything that, basically, so you hold that muscle mass. You've also spent 3 months training with the loads that are used to keep that muscle mass, that came along with getting that muscle mass.
Yeah.
So you hold that, and then when you diet down, there's always, if you look at sort of the progression of an increase in a muscle's fiber size, you see in the studies, I'm just drawing from a bunch of different lines of research here. They're all related, but basically kind of connecting the dots, that you can see a muscle cell get larger simply due to protein synthesis before you see any more satellite cells. So that's not nearly as much of a reconstruction of the muscle's ultrastructure as is increasing the number of satellite cells. So let's say, as the muscle cell gets bigger, you're adding more protein, and then at a certain point, you get another satellite cell, and let's say you got that last 10% of muscle mass, and then you diet right back down again before the satellite cells have had a chance to make their way in and set up residence, which is a mechanism of muscle memory holding on to that size. So you don't give it time to sort of solidify your gains is the term that people use. And then that new protein synthesis, that protein is more labile, more easily derived from. Then you go right into a heavy-duty caloric deficit. Well, if your caloric deficit is still too high, you'll be using fat, but you'll also draw from your protein stores.
Sure.
And, there's not much, there's more probably like less than 1,000 calories in a pound of muscle mass. And it depends on, how much intramuscular triglycerides in there, et cetera, et cetera. But you can lose a pound of muscle mass when you pull 1,000 calories from muscle to make up for that caloric deficit. And you can lose muscle mass really, really rapidly.
Easy.
So
a lot easier than fat.
1,000 calories. Oh, yeah. And if you push it too hard.
Yeah.
So that's I'll
tell you what.
So I
noticed having lost size and muscle, having gotten sick, I lost 40 pounds. A lot of that was, fluid as well. But, post getting sick, I stepped on the scale. I was 40 pounds down. I've been gaining it back. Composition is not the same. I'm up 30 pounds from 9 months ago when I was sick. Composition isn't
Yeah.
the same, but I'll tell you what, man, my legs don't really get a lot of body fat on them. They stay pretty lean year round. They have not changed size. My legs are the exact freaking same size as they were before. And I think it was literally just years of torturing them every Saturday in the gym, you know, like
Yeah.
a decade straight of just plain torture.
Yeah. You know, it's hard. There's some interesting patterns possibly too with what you're doing with your legs. Like we've already talked about your calves
Yeah.
and
That's
how
just,
like you have like, you know, that's kind of a genetic thing. So, you know, there's some genetics. Your activity levels can make a big difference.
Sure.
So you take someone who stops training and they may lose some size. There may be some muscle memory involved. And then you take someone who stops training and then cast one arm.
Oh yeah.
So there's true disuse there. So you had some level of disuse with COVID,
Right.
you know, just not doing things and no training. But it may be that relative to your normally daily activity, the level of disuse in your legs was much less than it was in your upper body.
The
Just
level of
because you're walking
disuse.
around.
We're talking. I had months at least of like 1,000 steps a day. Like we're talking.
Yeah.
You know, like bad.
Right.
You know, like I'm
Yeah,
talking like
yeah.
you know. So I mean, there was a lot of like disuse going on. So you think that
Oh, yeah.
preserved it? That would preserve it, maybe?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. So you've got like your calves, for instance, hold on to size really, really well.
Yeah.
And you could basically come up with a dose response
Yeah.
for an individual and for different muscle groups. And you see this when you look. They've done lots of studies, for instance, in if you look at like rats, rodents, like you can do something like it's called a hind limb suspension. So they'll jimmy them up by their tail, so they can't walk on their hind legs.
Okay.
And then they look at the calf muscles, and they look for the relative loss in size in the soleus versus the gastrocnemius,
Yeah.
for instance, because those muscles have different use patterns. So the soleus is more of a tonic muscle. It's used a lot during the day. It's kind of a postural muscle. They will be standing on it. And the gastrocnemius isn't usually used so much. So you can look at how those muscles differentially atrophy.
Huh.
So for you, you know, if you think about what you do day to day, like you don't ever do push-ups probably normally.
Right.
Your heavy loading is all in the gym, whereas you do some walking around. So
Yeah.
even if it's interesting. Like here's a particular study I can kind of remember some of the details from. This is there's a study with mice where they casted a leg, and they had different cohorts of mice. So they wanted to test the effect of just taking the leg out of that disuse situation, and see how much minimal activity did it take to prevent some of the disuse atrophy, and what will actually happen in terms of the muscle length too. And they found that if it had a mouse that was casted for 23 and a half hours out of 24 in a day, they could take it out of the cast. So they'd knock the mouse out and they'd take the cast off and just passively move it around.
Huh.
They could prevent a lot of the remodeling, the disuse, atrophy, and the change in length just from 30 minutes. So the rest of the day, there was no movement. That leg was casted. It was solid.
Yeah.
So it just took a little itty bitty bit of signaling through the movement and the stretching, which is going to cause some blood flow just by the sheer fact of the pressure changing and moving it around. The mouse wasn't even walking around in this case, but it was just a little bit of a signal, and so it didn't take much. That's definitely less than, it's about 5% of the day, I believe, something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
So, yeah, 10% of the day. So not much. So you were able to, but you probably weren't doing anything, like hardly no overhead lifting.
Of course not.
Like nothing that resembled, none of that kind of stuff. But you were walking around some too.
Yeah.
And I know you have stairs in your house.
Yep.
You may have had to go up the stairs. That probably weren't very, very fun.
Yeah.
I don't know if your bedroom's on a second floor, so you had to go up and down. So there may have been enough to prevent that. And plus, if that was your genetic proclivity to hold on to leg size that you've noticed anyway, it may have been that that's the case.
It may have
So
been. It may have been for sure.
yeah.
I would like to think it was all the years of hard
Oh
training because
yeah.
legs for me. Yeah, they took a lot to grow outside of calves. But let's move
That's
on though
another
because I know
factor.
you've got
That's
another
another factor. Yeah.
you've got a great topic that I would love to dig into. We're going to talk some about contest prep, and you've got a couple of figures here which I've got prepared. And then
Do we
after
want to
that,
cover
yeah,
keto question or
I was going to say after that we could jump into the listener questions. You want to tackle that
okay?
first?
Either way. Either way.
All
Let's
right.
do let's do the prep thing first, then we can go to the
Okay.
listener questions. So they'll give them
Cool.
a chance to
Yeah, if
jimmy
you
some
guys
up.
don't if you don't tune in for this whole live segment, this is of course on YouTube as well afterward, and our audio podcast app. Speaking of which, guys, if you're watching on YouTube, do us a favor, hit the like button if you're enjoying our content, or just either way, just to help me out. And if you haven't subscribed, we have a bunch of different bodybuilding podcasts coming out each week. So definitely I suggest subscribing and hitting the bell.
I have to comment on something I just read. I need to get some
Yeah.
Fant Ohm waffles.
Wait, what?
Tells me that he has that. There's a post here
Oh, yeah.
in the live feed. Yeah, he says he's literally wooed women in higher positions of life from what he's learned from these casts and a little bit of his own research. It's like I like you're using my material and I can't even use it. Like I don't get this shit.
What's
What's going on, man? Here I am,
that.
the 51-year-old virgin, basically not a virgin, but can't find a partner for the life of me. Oh, that's funny.
We need to get like I don't know, some type of a video to promote the channel, and we'll have different people come on and be like, yeah, I've been listening for 5 years. I get laid every weekend because I watch Think Big Bodybuilding Media.
It's like, well, maybe this next one will be helpful. Like you can say, let's have you heard of head down tilt? Let me show you what happens. Just lie down for me if you would and relax. Don't mind what I'm about to do.
All right, so I'm excited to hear about this topic here, head down tilt, because I feel like it could be I'm excited because a lot of our people may be able to use this as material to get laid.
That's what it's all really about anyway. In the mind of the man,
yes.
All this information is basically it's a simile of a card trick.
Yeah.
Basically it's just magic tricks. Like you're just trying to you get the dopamine flowing around so you can make your move, and it's like what's this?
It's too much info, Will.
Yeah. Oh, God. The pickup artist. What's the book? I'm trying to remember the name of the book that's about pickup artists. Anyway, it'll hit me later, I'm sure. So this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. This was a technique. I called it the trick because it is kind of a cool little trick that I was just kind of giving to clients for years because I just wanted to have the feeling, since they were paying me for the information as opposed to all the free information I give out, I wanted to save a little bit of something special for them.
Oh, shit.
So here's the background on this. The idea was, I've been working on, for years developing and kind of perfecting, coming up with strategies for peak week.
Yeah.
Ways to load, anything glucose disposal agents, fat loading, ways to drop water, herbal diuretics, the whole kit and caboodle. And that's in my book.
What's your book?
From what I understand, having this on your coffee table will increase your perceived sexiness by at least 2 points on a 10-point scale.
Be your own bodybuildingcoach.com, or go to Amazon for the hardcover like Scott has. You want it you want to be able to show the book,
Oh yes, absolutely. So one of the things that I come across, this is one of the perks of being an exercise physiologist, is like exercise physiologists do all sorts of things, is paying attention. We're just talking about disuse. So one of the main areas of research and understanding in disuse is space flight, is microgravity, as it's otherwise known. And NASA, lots of money flowing through NASA, they wanted to kind of come up with measures, countermeasures for disuse atrophy or atrophy due to microgravity where there's no gravity. So that's where some of the research, for instance, showing that eccentric contractions were important to prevent muscle loss or to gain muscle mass and to prevent muscle loss. So flywheel training, for instance, is something that had been around for a long time. And Per Tesh, who worked with my mentor, Gary Dudley, for many years, has done a lot of work on that. He actually has a whole line of flywheel training devices that load as much on the eccentric as you put in on the concentric. So it's a momentum-based thing that doesn't require gravity. One of the other big problems that was happening with astronauts when they come down from a prolonged space flight is they would land and they're going to their press conferences and they were passing out. They're going vasovagal. It wasn't because they were nervous, or someone was drawing their blood and they were fainting from the sight of blood or something like that. It was because they were hypovolemic. Their blood volume was low. And what happens is you have chemoreceptors and baroreceptors, peripheral and actually centrally in your brain, that help regulate blood volume. It's very important to have the right amount of blood volume and the blood constituencies to prevent dehydration or having too much blood volume or what have you. And part of those are baroreceptors. So a barometer is a pressure receptor. A baroreceptor measures blood pressure.
Yeah.
And one of the things that happens when you go to outer space, and I have a figure showing this. I don't know if I put it in what I messaged you.
I've got the one of the heart, and then I've got the one of the person laying down.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I had another one that I was going to show you, but it's okay. It had a whole bunch of other stuff I didn't want to confuse people with. So normally, and anyone who's like, for instance, like had a job where they spend a lot of time on their feet,
yeah,
and you end up, especially if like you're post contest, you've got a little more water than you want, you're retaining water, you'll end up with cankles. It's because there's hydrostatic pressure. Gravity's pulling the water down. Well, when you go into outer space, that's no longer the case. You don't have that. So what that does is facilitates blood flowing more easily back up to your heart. So this is a very important system, and it's a very redundant system for measuring and monitoring blood pressure and keeping the blood volume, which is important. If you also just doubled your blood volume, your blood pressure would go up. That's one of the problems with water retention and blood pressure is you have more volume in the vasculature, so it presses more on the vessels. So you go to outer space, you don't have gravity pulling the blood down. It goes up more readily, and it goes back and it feeds back to the heart. And the venous return, the blood returning in the venous system to the heart is increased. And the first chamber in the heart that receives that blood is the right atrium. So that's the right side receives the blood, pumps it to the lungs, hopefully gets oxygenated, and then the left side pumps it out to the body. So that right receiving chamber is a good place to measure and monitor signals as far as, are we doing a good job of keeping the blood volume where it needs to be so the blood pressure is where it needs to be to distribute the volume, either too much or too little. Well, in the case of microgravity, your blood's not being pulled down by the gravity. It flows back more readily, and it fills that right ventricle. So the picture of the heart is something we can throw up now.
All right. I got it around here somewhere. I lost it, Scott.
Oh,
how did I lose that heart picture?
I don't know. I just texted it to you today.
I know, and then I saved it, and then I lost it. There we are.
Yeah, boom. Your computer made a mistake.
Yeah.
So this kind of shows venous return there. You probably can't read. Let me make it a little larger. So there's actually stretch receptors there in the right heart. The right heart is an organ of the endocrine system because it releases atrial from the right atrium, natriuretic peptide or natriuretic factor. So that is a very interesting compound. It causes natriuresis. So natrium or sodium is lost, and water follows salt. Anyone who's read my chapter in the book uses that as sort of it's a kind of a memory, a mnemonic from anatomy and physiology. So when if you have a hormone that causes the loss of sodium and water follows salt, so to speak, sodium, then you're going to lose water. So too much stretch on the right atrium, it increases ANP. Yeah, you can nix it now. There's some details
right.
there. People can do a screen capture if they want. Go back. And I'm not going to get into all the details and the mechanisms and blah blah blah. But basically, too much blood volume, and then you have water loss, and that's because the system is sensing the blood volume's too high because there's too much flowing back to the heart. We've got too much venous return. Well, the reason for that is not because blood volume is too high per se. If you are at gravity, the reason is that you now have no gravity, and you don't have to have more blood volume to help feed the blood volume back to the heart and keep things flowing.
Huh.
So that's what happens. So there's a lot of peeing that will happen when they first go to outer space, the first 24 hours, because this is sensed. And then when these astronauts come back, they've adapted, their cardiovascular system's adapted to the microgravity.
Yeah.
They come back. Now they have low in blood volume. They're dehydrated.
No kidding.
So now they're not able to get enough blood volume because it's missing. They've lost it when they're in outer space up to the brain. If they stand up too quickly, they'll go vasovagal because literally there's not enough blood volume to keep the pressure in where it needs to be to get the blood to the brain, and they will pass out or get at least woozy because of that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how, and I know this Victor Convertino was a NASA exercise physiologist who talked about and did a lot of this research. So what they wanted to do was come up with a model, and this is kind of thinking ahead to when humans have to like go into outer space to find new worlds because we've destroyed the Earth and those sorts of things, or we're doing multiple experiments in space stations, what have you. How can we alleviate the loss of muscle mass? How can we alleviate this cardiovascular issue? So one of the models of disuse they came up with, and they kind of teased this out over the years, was, well, first we have to have disuse atrophy. So they're not using the muscles because everything weighs nothing. There's no gravity. So there's no heavy loads to pick up. So we're going to put them in bed. That's going to do that. So the disuse would be lie in bed if we're going to have a model and to do experiments with and try to figure out how much exercise do we need to do to keep muscle mass. So we have people, and there's one of the figures that you can find if you look up head down tilt, you'll see some of the figures from experiments where they literally have people lie in bed and just exercise on an exercise bike while they're in bed.
Okay.
And these are great experiments. Like they're like, we'll give you $5,000, but you have to live in this bed for the next month or next 3 months.
Okay.
$5,000 a month. So people maybe didn't have jobs that required them.
I could do that.
Take a
just
big vacation.
Move the cameras and stuff into the bedroom.
You could. You could, man. You could. You'd have to go into a lab and do it. So that took the bed rest took care of the disuse from the lack of gravity. But what they also found was that if they went to about a 6-degree head down tilt, so the head being lower than the feet,
yes,
and the whole body this way, it's not just raising their legs, the whole body, that would facilitate blood flow back to the heart. It would increase venous return, and 6 degrees ended up being kind of the magic number that matched what they had measured was happening in outer space.
Huh.
So they could basically cause the same cardiovascular effect of loss of blood volume by putting people on a head down tilt. So I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool, like nifty little stuff. But I'm thinking that also means they're losing body water. This is my bodybuilder mentality.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
So this was back in the late 90s, and I'm like, well, I'm going to try a head down tilt
because you don't need as much volume of fluid to push the. I got you. I'm piecing it together for myself.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is kind of a cool little story. So I'm not like so much worried about the volume in the blood. I just know that we've got ANP, atrial natriuretic factor, which is an endogenous released diuretic hormone. It's a natriuretic hormone. I want to facilitate the release of that hormone. I can do that just by lying in bed with the feet higher than the head of the bed.
Yeah.
6 degrees is what's used typically because this is really, they're not doing experiments with bodybuilders trying to get on stage with this, although lots of people are now. This is why this has come up, because this information is now out and people are employing it in the way that I have and my clients have for years. So actually the higher you go, the greater the diuresis you get. And that hasn't been fully explored, but there's at least one paper I think that I found where they explored various degrees of head down tilt. So what you can do then in the course of peak week is when you want to drop water overnight is jack up the foot of the bed and sleep that way. So a couple caveats to that. One, if you have regurg or GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease,
Yeah.
that's not a good thing. So if you got a lot of food you're trying to put down for whatever reason, the way you've strategized, it's not going to help. You could actually cause some issues there. If you have blood pressure issues, or anything like this, isn't like a medical recommendation, because you will find, because you can tell that your blood pressure goes up. Like the blood, now the water, instead of having pooling in your legs, the water will pool in your head.
Yeah.
And it can be uncomfortable. So there's some some unknown risk. I've never seen any of the papers with a 6-degree head down tilt, which is pretty mild.
What made you decide 6 degrees when you said that they could get a stronger effect by going further? Yeah, bodybuilders would be like, why don't I sleep in an inversion table?
The 6 degrees is what they found matched what happened in outer space.
Okay.
So the whole idea of the head down tilt bed rest was to mimic the effect of microgravity on the cardiovascular system.
Can I bring that figure up you had? You had a little picture
Yeah,
of this.
the 6 degree. Yeah, pull that up now.
Look at that.
So that's just kind of the idea. Yep.
I like that. Huh.
With a 6 degree. So it's not much. You can see it's not gigantic. It's not a huge angle.
Yeah.
But there's one paper that shows you'll get more a larger effect, which makes sense the higher the tilt.
Yeah.
So I've gone pretty high and kind of played around with it. But you can drop a pound or two easily that way. Most people can. So that's a little strategy. And the reason I wanted to kind of chat about that is because so my book's been out for a while, and I sort of spilled the beans, like explained the trick there. And then we have this paper that Guillermo Escalante, this is in my profile URL on Instagram. He's the first author. I think I'm the second. Chris Barakat, Alan Aragon, Brad Schoenfeld, I think, is the last author.
Okay.
We're the authors on that paper. It's a monster on peak week. It basically explains the rationale. It's put together, very similar to what I have in my Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach book. And I added that. That was in my book, and I added some more details to it there. So people are using it. It's very, very cool, and it's very effective for many, many people. I'm hearing this repeatedly on and over again. And I've done it so many ways. Like when I was living in Arizona and I go up to Phoenix to compete where the state shows were, I would bring cinder blocks with me. Literally, there were times when I literally brought a dolly and cinder blocks, and I would just go in the side of the hotel with my bags and my cinder blocks, and I sneak them up to the room and I put cinder blocks into there just so I didn't have to mess with it.
Yeah.
Didn't have to try to find something. Way back in the day, I used to use phone books.
Yeah, I could see phone books too.
Yeah. So I could run my phone book. I use the ironing board sometimes, or I use chairs, the chairs that are there, because it usually just be me.
Yeah.
I never really had anyone, with me at shows. So that's how I, figure out how to. Sometimes I don't have a choice. It wasn't like it's like I'm going to do, 8 degrees instead of 6 degrees, but you can slide it, further underneath and change the angle that way. But you're just kind of to some degree you're at the whim. You can actually get bed risers at Walmart, and I have those now. They're plastic and they're not that big.
Okay.
And I actually have been using those the last few years.
Nice.
The people that just use normally to raise up all 4 legs of the bed. So I've just been getting asked questions about that because I'm sure you're sharing stories where people are doing that during their peak week. The last one was Chris Barakat. Shout out to Chris. Won his pro card yesterday in the WNBF.
Oh, you're kidding me. Congratulations to him. That's awesome. And no surprise either, too. He's been getting in great shape this season.
Yeah, he looked really good. I have only seen a little bit of the shots on stage, but he did a post that is on Instagram. So he's doing his pro debut today.
Oh, no kidding.
That's how they do the shows. Yeah,
That's
you can
cool.
go right into the pro show on the next day. But he used it, I believe. Yeah, he did, because he posted. Story came out, and then people were like, "What is this? I have no idea what this is. This related to peak week."
Yeah.
So I just figured it made sense to explain it, especially because we don't know what's going on. But over the years, diuretics have been one of the most dangerous things in bodybuilding, and this has not been a good year as far as longevity goes in bodybuilding. So I think it makes sense to get this information out, because Nothing's 100% safe. You know, aspirin could kill you, water can kill you,
Sure.
etc. But this is one thing that people can read the paper and look at the possible risks that are there. But it's one thing that is the nice little trick to literally evoke an endogenous. It's playing with the human physiology to invoke diuresis for the purposes of drying out, and that all of the whole peak week, the way I do it, with the exception of caffeine, which is pretty safe as well, although it's not perfectly safe either. Caffeine will be used as a diuretic, just 50% above as a general rule of thumb, 50% above the habitual use, so you can get an effect on diuresis. And the rest of it's herbal diuretics and manipulation of water and sodium and diet, macronutrients and timing of things. And this is a nice little nugget stolen from. Yeah. People have used the strategies that I've been around for a long time. There's a post from like 2003 on Professional Muscle.
Yeah.
It's called Water Loss Without Drugs, and it's people still tell me they've read that.
Yeah.
They dig it up, they read it, and I say, hey, the whole thing's in my book. If you want to get it all there, the whole thing's in the paper now, so it's all there for free in the paper.
Yeah. In the book, it ties in with
read.
A lot of other stuff that relates to the peak that you're going to get if you go to the book. And obviously it is a great book, so I'm kind of promoting it here. But you can use that as a really a template, And we've known people that listen to the show that have, and they've had great success with it too,
Yeah.
So.
It's really, sometimes people get confused. It's really pretty simple. You limit your carbs, train your whole body, prime for a carb load, fill and spill, skip Hill's terminology there. Just fill up like a motherfucker. And then the next day before the show, you take care of your water by dropping water, drop your carbs. There's some timing issues there with sodium and water, and then you use the trick, head down, tilt overnight.
Yeah.
Wake up crispy. It's kind of that simple.
I love it. And that's the kind of thing too. If you wanted to, you could run a test run of that without screwing yourself up. You know what I mean? It's like, it's harder to test run diuretics.
You really can't test run diuretics and get the same effect. From what I've seen. I mean, you could every once in a while, you'll win the lottery and maybe, you can use the same sort of thing, but you can do this week in and week out. I would do it for 3 or 4 weeks in a row.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And you should do a test run. That's the most important thing, actually.
Yeah.
That's how you nail it. And then you don't have, we talked about this. Then you've got it all down. You know what you're doing. You know it's going to work. When you fill and spill on like a Thursday, you're like, man, I'm holding a lot of water. It's like, it's okay. I know this. That means I'm full.
Yeah.
That means because I just loaded in 1,500 grams of carbs.
Yeah.
I'm going to be just fine. I'm going to drop my water tomorrow. I'm going to wake up full and crispy dry.
Hell yeah.
So, but yeah, the main thing is it's just, I want people, it's going to be a paradigm shift. It's a lot easier to just like pop a pill. And the catch-22 is during the last month before a show, the last thing you're able to do for many people, and this is where, if any time a coach would be needed, it's then, is you're just not thinking clearly. It's just kind of the nature of the beast.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And I mean, heck, I was even reading into a little bit of information on leptin released from fat cells.
Okay.
So the more body fat you have, the more leptin you have, generally speaking, and leptin is going to be in very, very short supply when you're dieting down. There are leptin receptors on the hippocampus, which is your memory center in the brain.
Okay.
And so leptin is important for driving the memory mechanisms of your brain and being able to remember to do things.
No shit.
And learning processes. Yeah. So, I mean, leptin, just generally, the more leptin, it'll limit your appetite. It'll upregulate your metabolism. So you get too much body fat. This is one of those things that feeds back to your brain to get you to eat less and expend more calories in terms of metabolic rate. But it also make sense. It's also very interesting that you're not going to learn well. You're not going to remember as well. You're not going to be able to handle complex cognitive tasks,
which all makes sense.
Stay on point.
4 weeks
and
out,
leptin,
Well,
yeah, that's obvious. We know that's the case. But that's literally a connection that I found that I thought
Huh.
was really pretty interesting.
That is
There's leptin
fascinating.
receptors in the hippocampus, and they drive a neural connection, the formation of neural connections in the hippocampus, which is part of how we go about learning and remembering things.
Huh.
But you can practice this, like guide your way through it, during 3 or 4 weeks out when you're in good enough shape to see what's happening, and then you've got your blueprint. You just follow the directions
Yeah.
with the changes that you might feel you need to do, and there's none of this like, oh shit, I think I'm flat, I need to go eat a burger and fries. Like, oh shit, I spilled. Fuck, I need to take a diuretic. Shit, I'm flat again. Have some more sodium. I couldn't fill out. Oh fuck, I dropped the ball and I look like shit. But 3 days later, I look great. Like that whole trying to juggle things, if you're doing it on yourself, is a kind of a recipe for a disastrous on-stage appearance for many people.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I try to nail down as many of those things ahead of time. And you still, and I think this is probably good for some of the people to hear that are listening right now, because I'll get messages from people who even, they're like, hey, I'm 10 days out from a show, or I'm 2 weeks out from a show, and I would love to hire you just to do my peak. And I don't feel necessarily super comfortable with that, because the people that, like, I know you do a good job peaking people, that's what you'll hear. And my thought is like, well, the people I'm doing a good job with, we've been test running this every time they fill up. We load, we use this as an experiment basically. And by the time we get to the show, we're just doing what we've been doing, every week along the way, pretty much.
Right. But this is the thing, like literally if someone, let's say you're a month out and you're like, you know what? Okay, I get this. I want to give this a shot. And you can do it without me, or I'd be happy. This is one thing that I do. I help people with. But you could run it, 4 weeks out and you could run it 4 times in a row, and people will get leaner too, almost universally. Sounds like a little clickbaitish ad, but it really does happen that way.
Get leaner,
and
get
you
drier.
Actually recover. Yeah, it works really well. But you can run it again and again and again. So you could have 2 practice runs at a month out, and then the actual peak week for the show, and then be very confident in what you're doing.
I like that.
So
let me see what else we got here. I know we had a couple questions here.
Question on keto.
Yes, yeah. Let me bring that one up from Alexander. He says 29. He is 220 pounds, 35 years old. He was 285 pounds. He's on a, as he calls it, dirty keto and intermittent fasting, lifting heavy 3 times a week plus an hour of cardio. He says, I'm not seeing weight loss, nor am I seeing muscle loss. I'm staying stagnant. I asked him a couple questions here in the live feed while you were restarting your computer. He says, I'm having a hard time with clean keto because of my work schedule. Prep time is non-existent. I asked him, what does he mean by dirty keto? And he says that he's getting above 20 grams of carbs per day. And then he also adds, my brother lost 80 pounds on keto recently. And he says, I sleep better, less bloated, more energy on keto, I find. So, because I had asked him, I said, why jump to keto? A lot of times I don't jump straight to keto with people. If you take a guy who's 285 and you just clean his diet up, usually you can, get some progress there first. And keto for me, at least, would be a choice I would make down the road when I recognize that maybe keeping carbs in isn't necessarily going to be the most effective route. But I don't necessarily jump to it. But he said that's what the reason he's doing it. He said he sleeps better, less bloated, more energy.
Yeah. So the thing that I don't see is what his total calories are per day.
I wondered that too. Yeah.
That's what kind of what it comes down to. It's he could be doing intermittent fasting and keto and applying whatever other only grass-fed whey protein and who knows what else. But if he's eating
too
more
much
calories,
fat, too much protein, too much fat,
calories, yeah. The thing with keto is calories is the the name of the game. It's thermodynamics. If you feel better, which he does on a low carbohydrate diet, and
Mm-hmm.
he sleeps better and he's more active and he can expend more energy, then he's going to be someone who's going to probably do better on a lower carb or a keto
Yeah.
approach. So it's a nice, see what he's got there. Keto is nice. It's like we only have 2 macronutrients to worry about pretty much.
Yeah.
Avoid the carbs. You just eat fat and protein. Make sure you get enough protein, rest your calories from fat. So it's easy. He's also got the intermittent fasting. It's, 9 hours where he eats and then the window's done and he doesn't have to worry about it. There's no like, oh man, I missed my breakfast meal or what have you. So it's simple. It helps keep you on track, and that's super important. Those 2 things in combination, I don't know if this is the case. The calories would be maybe he's still listening. He can let us know what his daily caloric intake is. But those 2 things could be a recipe for a reduced thyroid. Keto will tend to do that. Low carbs will tend to do that. You don't have the greatest situation for your thyroid when you're doing intermittent fasting either. So in combination, and his brother lost 80 pounds. So that suggests there's, he may have be genetically prone to being successful with a keto approach.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit of research. I just tried to tease apart why people would have better effects, better success with a keto versus a high carb approach. And if with those people who are insulin insensitive,
Mm-hmm.
so using multiply your resting blood glucose with your resting insulin levels, going on a diet that's low in carbohydrate that would tend to promote greater insulin sensitivity tends to be more effective in some of the research with those people. So if you're someone who's doesn't have a problem with insulin sensitivity, then it doesn't really matter. But there seems to be a little bit of data suggesting so. Dirty keto made me also think maybe that he's eating like a lot of saturated fat, like just like burgers and yummy stuff. And this is sort of nitpicking. It's still, if the calories are still high, it doesn't really matter. But there are advantages thermodynamically. You see this going the opposite direction. Mainly that if you eat, there's one study with a high omega-6, so that's an essential fatty acid, more of an inflammatory one, but they use omega-6 linoleic acid-based diet compared to a high saturated fat diet, and you get more fat stored in the visceral fat component with the high saturated fat. So that would be kind of a dirty, like low omega essential fatty acid diet strategy.
Yeah.
And visceral fat's not good for insulin sensitivity, which isn't generally good for weight loss.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to play the insulin card like it's all about insulin, but that's something, that might be worth, exploring. I don't know what he means by, here's the thing, like you take a diet, like worst case scenario where he's eating like, just like dirty burgers, who knows, that maybe or even have, chemicals in there, who knows, worst case deal, that are pro-inflammatory, lots of cheese and saturated fat, and his calories are 2,000. And then you just switch him to less saturated fat, more monounsaturated fat, more polyunsaturated fats, drop his calories by 300, 400 a day, so he actually has a caloric deficit. Just change the foods, ensure a caloric deficit, and that can make all the difference in the world.
I think that's kind of what I would think as well. It'd be hard to give specifics on that without actually, like, if you saw what his actual diet was, we could probably be like, oh yeah, that right there, change that, change that meal to something else. Or like you said, the calorie thing. I think that may be it. It's easy to eat a lot of fat. It really is.
Yeah. The advantage for keto, why I use a low carb approach, is just that I don't eat very much. My
you use
appetite's
keto?
Impaired. I don't like shoot for ketosis. I mean, there's some metabolic inefficiencies that come from converting fat calories or fat molecules into ketones.
Yeah.
But it's like less than 100 a day. It's not like it's gonna all of a sudden like it's like you're using DNP or anything like that. So there's something there. But when I drop my carbs down, and let's just eat like with a keto style, bodybuilder style keto.
Yeah.
I'm not doing a clinical ketogenic diet. My appetite's low, and I just, it helps with my appetite tremendously.
I've noticed that
Protein
too.
is very satiating. Yeah, that's why I do it, and it's just sort of simple. You don't gotta, like, for me, it's like I know that if I go low carb, that I'm going to err on the side of a caloric deficit,
Mm.
almost unless I'm like at like 6%, something like that. Like I'm getting close to being stage ready. Then I'll have to be very careful. But otherwise, I just don't. I mean, I just don't tend to overeat. I mentioned I did the podcast with the folks from Africa. I
Oh
remember
yeah,
the
cool,
podcast.
cool. They're fun people,
Yeah,
aren't they?
yeah, they were. Yeah, was it them I told this? No, sorry. I've done like 5 podcasts in the last like 9 days, so they get all mixed up. And I had a group call. It
Okay.
wasn't them, but they are cool people. It wasn't them I told this to, so nix that. But I mentioned when long ago when I was in grad school, I played around with like how much protein can I eat a day?
Yeah.
See what happens. Just give it a shot. And I just ate chicken breast, like lean protein, and I was trying to eat like 3 or 4 or 5 pounds of chicken breast a day, and I couldn't eat. If I just ate protein, I literally couldn't eat in a caloric deficit.
I'm
Most I could
kidding.
get down was like maybe 3,000 calories,
Huh.
and that's when I was training on those days and running around on my feet all day long as a grad student, like teaching and running subjects through experiments, and I may even been personal. I wasn't personal training at the time, but I just protein is so satiating.
Yeah.
So that's the advantage for many people on the low carb diet is those it's just easy to do the accounting.
Yeah. He said he's still
Cutting
with us,
dairy
Alex
out.
Ellender. He says, thank you for that. I'll have to cut out dairy. Yeah, yeah. And I'm looking at 400 calories to cut. I'm only eating when I'm hungry, but then work sucks me in and I forget to keep track. Yeah, I think that no matter what diet you do, because that was one of the first things he said was he's doing dirty keto because he stress with work. Keto because of my work schedule, prep time is non-existent. I think what a big thing is. It's like it's completely necessary if you're going to get into shape. Is like figure out how to make that time. Even like you could figure out how to prep things quickly. Like you could figure out how can I cook in bulk. You've got a day off, or you know what, a crock pot. I've taken a ton of chicken breasts, thrown them in a crock pot, and hit the 6-hour button, and then gone to bed. And it's the weirdest sensation when you wake up in the morning and your house smells
Awesome.
like chicken dinner,
I love it.
or like
Yeah.
it smells like
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, and it's like it's 5 a.m. and you're like, what's going on? But then you have a bunch of food.
Yeah. Dude, I used to do a thing. I did this for years back in Arizona. It was just like that. I would take a frozen turkey, like a whole turkey,
Okay.
and I was eating a whole turkey a day. Actually,
How
that's
many
when I was
pounds?
bulking,
Like what size turkey are we talking here?
like a 10-pound turkey, something like that.
That's amazing.
Well, yeah, and I would just put it in the oven, and I'd set the timer,
Yeah.
so that it would be ready in the morning. So literally, I knew I was getting up at 8 or 9 or whatever. It would beep 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 beep, and the turkey be ready, and my whole house would smell like Thanksgiving. And I would
Wow.
just pull it out and be done. But it was just I didn't have to think about it, so it was even kind of better than. But it was I throw it in there frozen. I had to figure out how to cook it, and
Yeah.
what temperature, so it didn't get like burnt on the outside and like not done on the inside. But he
Turkey.
mentioned taking out dairy. I don't need to know that he needs to take out dairy,
Yeah.
unless you're drinking milk, which is gonna have carbs in it. But
Yeah. I'll tell you what, man. I don't think personally, depending on what dairy we're talking about, I don't include a lot of dairy in a fat loss diet. Personally.
I don't know what he means by like what dairy he's eating. I mean cheese.
Could be.
Casein is high. There's a lot of casein in cheese. Casein is a dairy product. So is whey. That could be very helpful for keeping them on track.
Yeah, but
a strategy that
how much protein are you getting out of that though? I mean, I guess you're getting fat. You're not.
Yeah, I
You're
don't know
not getting a lot
what he
of
means by
protein out
dairy.
of. You're not getting a lot of protein out of cheese, though. I don't ever try to look at cheese as being like, well, we better add in some cheese to make sure we get enough protein here.
That's why I asked. That's why I asked. You can actually. I actually eat a lot of cheese.
Yeah,
Um,
I love
Depends on
cheese.
the day. Yeah, string cheese,
Yeah.
perfect. You just throw that in a cooler and you just peel it away. They
Okay, he
have
says
actually low.
cheese and whole fat
Okay,
yogurt.
yeah. I don't know that that's the worst. Look at the carbs in the yogurt, but
Yeah, yogurt's not a terrible thing.
that varies a lot. But there's low fat cheese that's
Yeah.
out there. That's
Oh,
not
that's an
high in carbs.
abomination, though. It's terrible. It's the worst.
Like because it's just something that shouldn't exist in this world.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
yeah, it does kind of defy. It should be in another meta universe.
Yeah.
In the
Exactly.
multiverse, it shouldn't be around. You know,
Let's wrap this thing up. What
it's
do
like
you
having
say?
an evil Superman. Yeah. Okay. Did we get all the questions? I think
We did. Yes. I
we did.
sifted back through. Thanks for everybody who posted.
All
We
right.
got a bunch of comments and everything. We appreciate everybody who's been hanging with us. We had it's like Matt was with us. Vincent Ford, he's been with us for a long time. Of course, William was with us. What's up, Nathan? Edward.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to say his name. Is it Fant?
Font
Fant?
Ohm waffles.
Fant?
I'm guessing that maybe Ohm waffles. That may be his last name,
Oh, what's up,
but
Lucas?
I don't know
Elijah?
that may be a facetious one too.
That's possible. Anyway,
Ohm
we
waffles.
we appreciate you guys hanging with us. Scott, I always appreciate hanging out with you, getting to talk about some bodybuilding stuff. Guys, go to Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach, BYOBBcoach.com, or you can go to Amazon, check out the hardcover there. Of course, check out our sponsors, TrueNutrition.com. You can go in there, get some awesome supplements, use our code THINK, supplementsource.ca. Shop with them if you're in Canada. And if you need some good research stuff, go to amino-asylum.com, use our code THINK. You'll get 20% off of all your research needs for your science experiments.
Don't forget your daily ephedrine. Your SMRDA for ephedrine.
Yeah.
3 pills a day.
You got to take 3 at least.